Do you ever feel like you're not getting your advertising right and you're attracting the wrong kind of tenants? Or are you feeling completely lost because you don't even know where or how to advertise? If so, fear not, you are in absolutely the right place, because tonight we're going to be talking to expert David Aizikov from Rentboard, who's going to be giving you the inside scoop on how to advertise your properties, where to advertise for properties so that you can attract quality tenants. Welcome, David, to Alberta Landlords Watch, formerly known as Ask Nelda Schulte.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great that you're here. And welcome, Gil, again.
Hello.
Gil joins us from Vancouver. David is now in Vaughan, Ontario, but not permanently. He's just visiting. So as I mentioned, Alberta Landlords Watch was formerly known as Ask Nelda, because it's the same as my business name. And my name, predictably, is Nelda Schulte. And as mentioned, I'm joined tonight by Gil Donkersgood, who's my former partner in when I had a property management business, Calgary Dwelling Consultants. And Gil is joining us from BC. And I'm also joined by special guest David Aizikov from Rentboard, who is from Ontario and Toronto, Ontario. So David started his career in real estate, working as a development consultant, helping developers get purpose-built rental projects from pre-development through to stabilization. And then after a while, he thought, hey, I'm collecting all this great data. Why don't I segue this into another career? And so he took his data knowledge and he applied it to Canada's largest multifamily marketing firm, where he specializes in data analytics to help clients make more informed decisions. So thank you, David, for joining us again. And let's just jump right in. So you're going to give us the inside scoop on how to advertise your properties to attract quality tenants. So where should landlords advertise? Let's start with.
Yeah, great question. First and foremost, I know a lot of landlords, they tend to kind of stick with what works, but we have to acknowledge that nowadays 75%, if not more, of all leasing activity happens online. So first and foremost, make sure that you're actually targeting where renters are. So make sure that you're putting your properties out there online. Rentboard, Rentfaster, Rentals.ca, those are all fantastic avenues. Certainly in Alberta, Rentfaster, Rentboard have really, really strong, renter uptake and have, pretty strong, activity amongst renters on a daily basis.
Yeah, and that's really important. So depending on what region you're in, tenants will migrate more towards certain sites. And I like to use this as an example. When I first bought a property in Fort McMurray, where I started advertising was where everybody looked, which was in the local newspaper. I know, yes, newspapers seem very archaic. And it was Wednesday night's newspaper. So you had to make sure your ad got in on a Wednesday night. And that's when people would start calling you. And then it changed. Then it moved on to Kijiji. And then from Kijiji, it moved on to Rentfaster and Rentboard. And now it's Rentboard, Rentfaster, and Marketplace. Facebook seems to have also taken up a big share of the real estate here on the online rental platforms. So yes, depending on your area, the thing I really like about Rentboard and Rentfaster is that they're national. So you can advertise in the comfort of your own home, and it can go national because you never know where people are coming from when they're looking for a rental property. They're not just in your city. Sometimes people are moving into provincially or globally. And so you have to hit a rental market that everybody can access, and that's very popular, as Rentboard is. So next question is, what are the components of a good ad and why? And I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah, that is, I could probably talk about this for a good 15, 20 minutes, but I like to say that, a good listing ultimately attracts really good tenants because, ultimately they really go hand in hand. They're one and the same. When you're putting together, a complete listing, ultimately, there are basically 10 rules that I like to, consider, which ultimately ensure that you're giving the tenant exactly what they need. You're putting it together in a really nice, cohesive, high quality format. And ultimately, you're not throwing out, any unnecessary file word content. So, keeping it simple, nice short description about the property. Avoid using one standard unit. We see this quite a lot with smaller landlords. Or smaller properties. If you only have, let's say, two, 1 beds or two beds, instead of creating individual, units within each listing for each unit availability, you only create one. No, typically we recommend create individual availability for each available unit. it typically shows better. And if there are variations, if someone says, well, I want a quarter unit, or I want a first or second floor unit, it gives them that information and ensures that they're actually pre-qualified before they reach out. From there, really high quality photos. Nowadays, thank God all of us have fantastic smartphones. You can take really high quality shots on your phone. Make sure you do that. Don't take cluttered shots. Make sure they're not blurry, and if they are, retake them. There's nothing worse for you than a blurry image on an online listing. And then, just make sure the listings are complete, right? That's really important. And again, I see big and small landlords, they fail at this on a daily basis. If you have amenities, unit features, put that in the listing, because if you fill out your listings correctly, the listings are then searchable. So if a tenant wanted to, were to go on RentFast or Rentboard, and they said, well, I'm only interested in units between this price, and I'm only interested in units with a dishwasher and, let's say tile floors, because my cat tends to pee outside the litter box. Well, if you enter those correctly, your unit will show up properly. Whereas if you don't, it's not going to show up and your visibility gets reduced. And then, from there, a few basic, kind of housekeeping practices or housekeeping rules, excuse me. Descriptions, 500 words or less. We're not writing or diatribes here. You want to start with your best features, mention the neighborhood, and then the biggest one, avoid all caps.
Why is that?
It doesn't read well, and it also throws off alarms for a lot of people. When you look at a listing, you want it to look professional, you want it to look put together. And the moment you start seeing all caps, you start thinking one of two things: either this is a scam, or I need to stay away because this person, if the listing is a mess, I don't even want to know what they're going to be like as my landlord.
Yeah. So you're making a first impression with the way you write and the way you present your ad, not just your apartment, house, or condo itself.
Absolutely.
Do you want to show us examples of good rental properties?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me share my screen here for you.
There's screen share on the bottom of my screen. I don't know if it's in the middle. It's the little square with the arrow that goes up.
There we go.
Okay, so I just need to give you permission. And here we are. Young and Eglinton. I used to live close by there.
So this is, just a basic example of a really high quality listing. Of course, this is a larger property. There we go. Ultimately, really what you're looking for here is you're looking to make sure that everything's complete. We have a nice profile photo. It's high quality. All the information is complete. We see here that the property is pet friendly. They have multiple units listed, and very, very importantly, each of the units has a square footage. When we scroll down here, just like I said, so we see here there are individual units. Each unit has an individual rent. One thing that is a misconception that is becoming increasingly less so. Landlords used to not include rent in a listing. They said, well, if they're interested, they're going to call me. That doesn't happen.
That's
if
crazy.
If they don't see a rent, they're just going to move on to the next property.
Well, yeah, because when you think about it, whenever you're going to buy anything or rent anything, you want to know what the price is. Well, firstly, you want to know where it is, because is it close to work? Is it close to my, school? Whatever it is that you need it to be close to. And then secondly, can I afford it?
Absolutely, yeah.
If you don't list the price, how are you going to know if you can afford it?
And they're probably going to search based on price as well. So if you don't have the price, you're not going to show up.
Yep. We've done some analysis recently on what renters are actually searching for when they're looking for units. So first and foremost, price is the biggest factor. It's not the biggest factor for every age group, though. If you're dealing primarily with households aged 55 plus, price is going to be the main consideration. If you're dealing with households aged 18 to 23 or 24, it's also the biggest consideration. Anywhere in between there, at that point, they're more focused on lifestyle, amenities, and finishes or features. But ultimately, price and the unit, that's what everybody's looking for, and they have to make sure it's within their lifestyle requirement and price point. And then last but not least, here we have a nice description. This one I will say is a little bit long, but ultimately what it does is it gives us a short little blurb, talks about the property, talks about the communities, and then talks about the unit, and that's what we want to focus on.
Yeah, I looked through this actually when you sent me the links, and I thought, holy caboodles, is this ever long? Do you want to scroll down and show them how long this is?
This is just a screenshot, so I don't quite have it, but let's just say it's twice as long as this.
Yeah, about 1,000 amenities, including the washer, dryer, carburetor. Like it
They're
listed
being
every
thorough.
single thing. So the list was as long as my arm. So yeah, I mean, but it told you exactly what was included in the apartment, and I thought, oh, maybe I should pack my bags and go. That sounds pretty good.
Here I have another example of a property from Rentboard. So here again, we see they have the individual unit breakdowns, bed, bath, square footage, again, very important. They have the utilities. Again, very, very important. If utilities are included, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not including it within the listing. And then last but not least here, we see here a very short description. It talks about the unit, it talks about the bed, the unit type. It gives you a description of what's included within the unit. And then it gives you a short blurb about the neighborhood, about what you're getting, about transportation, and some of the local amenities.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. So yeah, just to reiterate, and that's something I always learn something new from every single person we interview, and wasn't aware that there were certain demographics where money wasn't really an issue. I always thought everybody went by price and by neighborhood, but clearly it's not everybody. It's 18 to 23 looks for price, and 55 onward looks for price, and then there's that middle group that want a beautiful place in a great area and offers all the great stuff that they want, a yoga studio, whatever, dog wash.
Yeah, that's becoming increasingly more common, certainly as real estate costs or prices go up in a lot of major markets. People are being priced out of purchasing a home, so they're being relegated to the rental market for longer. And as their incomes continue to go up, so does the cost of buying a home. So ultimately, instead of buying a home, they now that they have stronger purchasing power, they want that increased quality of living.
Mm-hmm. There's a property that we rented in the southeast, just a really amazing place. And talk about amazing amenities. Well, there are two that come to mind. One had a craft room, a car wash bay area, which is not at all uncommon. It had a mechanic room where you could actually work on cars or something like that, engines or whatever. It had a beautiful building in the center of the square that had the upstairs was a 360 floor to ceiling windows workout area. And downstairs, it had 2 conference rooms and about 4 offices that you could rent, which were fabulous. They had fireplaces. It was amazing. And we saw another one that we rented as well. It had a concert hall and a kitchen, an industrial kitchen. I mean, those are 2 things I would have never thought of putting in a condominium building, but they were there. Obviously, a concert hall. It's like, how many concert pianists do you have? I think concert hall is an absolute must in the next condo that I move into. But clearly, they thought that it would be a good selling feature for their potential tenants. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I remember tennis courts and party rooms and pools. The one place had a pool. There's all sorts of really cool features that a person would look for.
Yes. Yeah, just amazing stuff. It kind of makes you think, gee, my house is kind of cheesy. I don't have a tennis court or a pool or a concert hall. I should build a concert hall and attach my house onto it. All right. So what's a bad ad then, David?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, a bad ad is one that either doesn't attract a prospect or makes you look like a scam. A bad ad is one, with blurry images. It's one with a lack of images. We typically recommend, if you're going to put together an ad, you want to include at least 1 exterior shot, show them what the property looks like, and then you want to include at least, and that I say at least as a rule of thumb, at least 8 interior shots. You want to make sure you're giving them a few of the common areas, 1 of the bedroom, and then maybe from a few different perspectives as well. It gives prospects a better understanding of what they're really looking into. Another example of a bad listing is one where there's no information. You can give me a description, but if none of the other fields are complete, the listing on its own doesn't look very good. And if it doesn't look very good, it's not going to appeal to renters. And if it doesn't appeal to renters, they're not going to submit any leads. And then last but not least, from there, it's really going to be a ad that just feels, it feels discombobulated. Sometimes we'll have listings that have very specific instructions. You must do this, you have to do this, avoid that at all costs. You're not there to give them a list of instructions or demands. You're there just to tell them about the property. Your job is to sell the property, their job is to sell themselves. So make sure that you're doing a good job selling the property. You're not, they're not your tenant yet.
Yeah, I like to see those ads where they say, know this, know that, know this, know the... It's like the 10 Commandments backwards. I don't know. kind of a strange thing. There was a property, I used to live in this area in Edmonton, downtown Edmonton, and there was a property that was right on the corner that I had to cross by every time I walked out. And there was an ad on the window that the owners had put on, and they said, no drinking, no drugs, no, you know, they had a whole list of no's. And on the bottom, they said, no evil. I thought,
I mean, the
well,
last one's a good one.
that's going to attract a lot of tenants.
There was that Airbnb in Sedona where they had.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was just everything had rules, including the shower. You were allowed to have. They had a timer on the shower so that you couldn't take a shower longer than a certain amount of time.
It had a little hourglass. They had little instructions there that said, you know, when this hourglass tips over, your shower should be finished.
And we're just thinking this feels more like a sentence than a vacation.
Which is the review that Gil left them. He said, I thought we were taking a vacation. I didn't think we were getting a prison sentence.
So, yeah, I get what you're saying. It comes across, you don't want to come across being too authoritarian when you're trying to sell the property. Yeah.
Yes, you have rules. I mean, everybody has rules. And of course, you need to find out if they're going to honor your rules. And if you want to know how to do that, watch the last video with Hart Togman. He had some excellent ways to screen people to find out if they're the kinds of people who actually follow rules or not. And but yeah, while you're in the attraction phase, you're putting your best face forward. So you want to attract, not detract. So love your comments, David. And now it's Gil's turn.
All right. So we answered the first question. So do you have some tips on setting competitive rental rates?
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, what I like to say is setting rents is, you know, equal parts art, science, and a little bit of intuition as well. It's something that you have to, you know, just you learn and you refine over time. You know, you're not going to set the rents right the first time, but it comes with practice. And at the end of the day, it just comes time to educating yourself, right? You know, when we set rents, you know, again, I like to come up with rules. So there are 3 rules that I like to consider when I'm setting rents. The first is know your comps. You have to know who your competitors are. You have to know where they are. You have to know what they're offering. And then ultimately, you have to know what their prices are. From there, and equally important, know how you compare to your comps. The only way you can identify who your comps are, and when I say comps, I mean competitors, comparable properties. The only way to identify who they are is to understand what your property offers, the value proposition that your value, you know, can offer renters. So you have to understand the location, the age, the quality, you know, the level of features and finishes, you know, what level of luxury are you offering, and does it compare to these other competitors? And then last but not least, it's just tracking the market. You have to do this on an ongoing basis. This isn't a one and done thing. This is something you do every single week, every single month for the rest of your life. You know, I've spoken to developers, you know, who are well into their 80s. And, you know, I spoke to a developer 2 years ago who was joking about how, you know, back in my day, we used to mystery shop every week. And he's like, you youngins probably don't even know what that's like. No, we still do that. We have to do that constantly. You know, every time I get a new project, I have to go to that building and I have to walk the building. And then I have to find out who the local competitors are and I have to walk their buildings. You know, I reach out to them. I tell them that I'm a renter. I want to find an apartment, and I'll ask them to show me around and they'll do it. And that's how you get a sense of, you know, who your competitors are. And then from there, it's really just an understanding of, you know, kind of a relative understanding of how you rank relative to your competitors. So I've prepared a couple of slides. We'll go through them very quickly.
No, I used to do this years ago. I worked as an employment specialist for a private college, and I used to go around and mystery shop. So I pretend that I was a potential student who wanted to take one of the programs, and I would book appointments with our competitors, and I'd see how they did. What my first impression was it professional? You know, what were their prices? What were they offering? What was my final impression when I left? Was it someplace that I was sold on, or did I think, yeah? Anyway, we compared them all the time. We always used to mystery shop. So it's something you do in a lot of industries.
Absolutely, yeah.
Should definitely do when I'm running ads. Whenever I'm going to run an ad, even when tenants, before they've given me their notice, I start shopping other ads and say, okay, what are other ads in the area renting for? What are other properties? Are they similar? Are they different? How different are they? What do they offer that I don't, and vice versa? And then you know how to price your property.
Yeah. So, whenever I go through this, if we're pricing units for a large development, first and foremost, we have to understand what our unit mix is. So, here we have, let's say, our recommended unit mix. Our studios are 450 to 500, one beds 550, and on and on and on. Now that we know what our building looks like and the types of units, we should also understand what our, amenities look like. We can start to go out and actually identify where comps are. So first and foremost, we've already been over this, but some of the factors to consider. And what we have to do is effectively you create a matrix, okay, of all of these various fields, and then you have to identify whether your property is superior, inferior, or the same. So location, is your location superior, inferior, the same? Is your property directly in front of a transit station or a subway stop? Do you have better services? Is it right next to a major employment hub, right? Or it doesn't have really good highway access. Again, accessibility, transit, walkability, drivability, visibility. Does the building have really good visibility from street level? Does it have great views potentially? Amenities, that is probably one of the biggest ones because amenities, they help sell a building time and time again throughout the lifetime. Obviously, this doesn't, this isn't as relevant for smaller single family homes or duplexes, triplexes, but this also includes some of the features and finishes. Do you have a nicer oven potentially? Do you have cleaner floors? How well is the property maintained? All of that goes into rent setting. Okay, and then from there, it's basically just looking at the properties, understanding what their rents are, so actually collecting their rents. Back in the day, we would have to call properties and we would have to call them over and over again. What are the one beds? What are the two beds? What are the three beds? Now we can find a lot of this stuff online, which is fantastic. There are also quite a few services that provide you with comp data. Okay. And then from there, what we do is we basically write down everything. Okay. Everything has to be, it's either digital or on paper, so I can compare it side by side, apples to apples, oranges to oranges, so this is an example of something that I've done for a previous project, basically just recorded all the individual rents, the unit types, the sizes, the mix, and the actual rents, the ranges, excuse me, along with the finishes and the amenities, right? I call this my little cheat sheet, and it tells me exactly what each property offers, okay? And then from there, once we finished ranking them, we understand, okay, if I have, let's say I'm looking at 5 different comps, I know how they all rank relative to my property. From there, I can then understand where my property should be on rents based on the rents that these other properties are achieving. We say market rent. Well, market rent is just what the market is achieving. And that simply means whatever everyone else is charging. And that's how you set your rents. You set your rents based on what other people are charging.
Holy caboodles. 1,000 square feet, not even 964 feet, rents between $2,420 and $4,000.
Yes, I will say these rents are from the city of Toronto.
Oh my God! Between 1,000 and 1,200 square feet, $4,105.
It's not as bad if you have roommates.
Yeah, but for 1,000 feet, that doesn't give you a lot of space for a room.
It certainly doesn't. But that's the reality we have to live with. One beds for new construction in the city of Toronto. Nowadays, this rent was taken about 9 months ago. Now a one bed will reasonably start between $2,200 and $2,300. A two bed starts at a two bed size, a normal sized one bed size, about 660, 670 square feet, easily starts at $2,400.
Wow.
And a three bed, you're not going to find anything under $3,000.
Wow.
Yeah. If you have any questions, by all means, let me know. Otherwise, this is effectively the process of rent setting. As you refine it in time and over and over again, you can better understand what your property can achieve. What we typically will do is we start with round numbers, and then as we lease more and more units, we push the rents higher and higher and higher. And as soon as we start slowing down the rate of leasing, we can kind of start to understand, okay, we've hit the limit. This is the property isn't able to bear this, or renters aren't able to bear this, and we bring the rents down.
Okay.
So we start at nice round numbers, and then we go up $5 to $15 increments.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. Yeah. So Gil?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. So how else can landlords get noticed? What other tricks do you have?
Yeah, you know what? Let me. So one of the things that Rentboard and Rent Faster both offer are we offer additional listing services or listing features, excuse me, that are specifically targeted or meant to allow landlords, property owners to get better exposure. So Rentboard, this would have been about 6 months ago, released featured listings. This allows you to pay for basically a higher position within the rankings of all your local competitors when a prospect is looking for an apartment. What we found is that at the bare minimum, we have different ranks, obviously, it'll increase overall lead gen by 2 times. There is a higher tier of promoted listing that will actually increase lead gen by 4 times, which is fantastic because at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. If you're struggling, to fill a vacancy, what you need to do is at a certain point, it becomes a numbers game, excuse me, because all it really takes is that one prospect to sign a lease. And once they've signed it, you've made your money back.
Yeah, they used to have a similar feature in Kijiji, but you get, depending on how many people were also vying for that top position, you could get bumped down to the bottom on page 10. So I never thought it was very good. So yeah, I remember calling them and saying, how come my ad's down at the bottom? I a feature ad, and they're like, oh, well, we had 100 other people who also wanted a feature ad today. So you got bumped to page 10. I thought, well, that's not really a feature ad now, is it? So, but Rentboard, you pay for a feature ad, and your feature ad is right up at the top. That's where it stays.
Correct. Yeah, that's one thing we were very adamant about. If someone pays for a featured ad, it has to appear ultimately. If you pay for a featured ad for 1 bed and someone is searching for a 3-bed, it's not as valuable. But if they're searching for that same type of unit, your listing is always going to appear right there at the top. With really good visibility. The listings are twice the size of the other ones. It really draws the eye.
That's fantastic.
That makes sense because once you're on page 10, you're probably not going to get seen anymore.
No.
Yeah.
People don't have a for that. Sorry.
All right. So here's a fun one. I like this one. Rental scams are always coming up, usually seasonally. Can you tell us what types of scams you're seeing that landlords need to be aware of?
Yeah. So it's funny. Me and Nelda were just talking about this. Rental scams really are a seasonal thing. We have a joke around the office that the scammers like to take the holidays off, but that's really not. That's not what they're doing. They like to prey on people. They want to prey on people when they're at the weakest, and the weakest is really when there's the most competition. Peak of summer, right? When leasing activity or rental activity is at its highest, that's when they're the busiest because they know that it's something that they can just kind of blend in with, right? So recently, we've been seeing two types of scams. I like to call them relistings and upfront payments. They're very similar. However, they kind of go in opposite directions. So the first one, and this is becoming more common, certainly in larger communities. Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, Victoria. We're seeing that across the country. We'll see tenants relisting units at a higher rent. Not as important, certainly not a huge scam, not something to be overly concerned about, but ultimately this is someone taking advantage of a landlord and nobody's happy to see it. So what they do is they effectively will sublet the unit at a higher rate without letting the landlord know that it's happening. And we're seeing this at substantially higher rates recently. And then the much bigger one, the one that's of pretty big concern, I'm sure everybody's already read articles about this, certainly on CBC, are people that are claiming to be the homeowner. Mm-hmm. That one is huge. That one, unfortunately, well, maybe not huge, but it's growing. It peaked about I would say last summer. Hopefully, we don't see a resurgence of it, but unfortunately, we likely will. And oftentimes, what this is someone who they'll claim to own the property. They'll claim to be the representative of the property. They'll have limited documentation. They'll ask for upfront payment. That's always a very big one. That's one thing we should always avoid. And they'll attempt to rush the signing. I like to say, never let anyone pressure you into signing anything. Certainly not when it involves parting with your own money. But unfortunately, when it comes to housing, people are desperate, and they can be easily swayed sometimes. These are 2 pretty big ones that we've been seeing recently. But there are a few other more general ones or things that people, we typically say to look out for. Like price is always a big one. Oftentimes, what they'll do is they'll just set a very low price, and that'll attract tons of people because, the moment they see that price, their eyes glow and they think, oh my God, this is too good to miss to pass up. I have to get this apartment. Little do they know that this person is basically, it's a numbers game. They're looking for 200, 300 inquiries. And as long as, 1, maybe 2 people fall for the scam, they've already made thousands of dollars and they're happy.
We used to see that a lot. Actually, when we ran a lot of ads with the property management business, our ads got hacked a number of times. So somebody say exactly what you're saying. Someone would take our ad, advertise it somewhere else for a lower price. So how we found out, A, we got calls from the police. B, we got calls from tenants who were looking for ads, and they said, did you know your ad's being advertised in 2 different places? One at this price and the other one at that price. We thought the low price was crazy, so we're going to call you and tell you about this. So tenants would help us, potential tenants, to alert us. So that used to happen really very frequently, especially in the springtime. And then Gil actually wrote an article about another one that used to come up in the summer all the time. He called it the article was called The Indomitable Anne Grove. Gil, do you want to tell us about Anne? Because this one comes up fairly frequently.
I'm trying to remember. I believe Anne was. Oh, can you? I'm going to get you to help me on that.
She lives overseas, but she's
that's
on
what
a boat or someplace where she can't communicate with people, and she wants to rent your property sight unseen, and she has all this money because she got this inheritance, or they're trying to convince you all the money they have, and she wants to move in, and she wants to pay cash or send you a money order. But the scam is, do you remember the scam, Gil?
I believe the scam, this is the one, because there's so many of them. I believe the scam is that she sends you the money. Then for some reason you need to send it. She writes the check wrong or something, and you need to send the.
Yeah, it's too much.
So you have to send it back. And then between the time the check gets dishonored, so you end up sending her the money, and your check is you don't get the money yourself. So it's a scam where you get screwed, and you certainly don't get a tenant.
But all the red flags would go off. If you run enough ads, kind of like David's saying, and you see enough ads, you're going to start recognizing red flags. So price is too low. They want to pressure you. They want you to pay cash. They want you to pay right now. And in our case, it was tenants who would say that they were overseas and they wanted to pay cash, and they didn't want to see any other properties, and your place was the only place for them, and it just sounded kind of hokey. Now that said, we did get a lot of people who were international or interprovincial or whatever who couldn't come in person and see the property, and they did need to find something remotely. Like we had people who moved from Norway, people who came from the United States, people who moved from all over the world, Indonesia, Thailand, and they needed to rent a place sight unseen. So, there are a number of things that you can do digitally. One is you can take a digital view of the place when you're going through it, or have that available on your site. The other is sometimes they had somebody who lived in the city, and that person would take a tour with me, sort of by proxy. And so they could say, oh yeah, Nelda's legit, and this is a legit property, and looks really nice, and it's clean, and yeah, let's go for it. So there are a number of things that they could do.
The tricky part was actually doing the diligence once they accepted the place, because at that point you didn't necessarily have the ability to do credit checks because they're in another country. Might have a hard time verifying references, again, country. So you had to sort of modify your vetting process a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to get into those right now.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, but it's very good to know that those do exist. We actually do talk about them on my website, neldaschulte.com. There are articles that walk you through what to ask for and how to ask for it, and how to recognize if it's legit or not, because there's a lot of scammers in the world. But if you give people enough hoops to jump through, you can eliminate quite a few of them. So.
Yeah, oftentimes we notice that scammers really aren't looking for that. They're not looking. The moment you show that you are competent, the moment you show that you're willing to question them, that's when they drop off. Yeah. Because that's not what they're looking for. Like oftentimes, people wonder, well, why does a scam obviously look like a scam? The pictures look terrible. They're clearly stolen. The price doesn't look right. Well, that's why they're doing this on purpose, because they're not looking to prey on someone who is capable of questioning things. They're looking to prey on someone who is going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're looking for someone who is going to accept whatever they say, because that's an easy target. It's really sad to say, but that's one of the reasons that you have these like senior scams. Because sometimes you call an older person, you claim to be their grandchild, and it's believable because they want to believe it, and it's really, really sad, but that's the way it works. They want it to look believable, or not believable, excuse me, because as long as they're able to filter out everybody that's going to catch on, the few people that are left over are likely to be easy targets.
Mhm.
True.
Yeah. Yes, good to know.
So, do you have any other suggestions for interprovincial or other countries besides what we've gone through?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, the basic one now, ask, just like Nelda said, ask for, like a video conference, take me through the apartment, show me the nooks and crannies. That one works really, really well. We also have video conferencing built into quite a lot of, platforms to allow for these virtual tours, which works really well. I'm a big believer in seeing properties myself, unfortunately. I don't know if I'm a dinosaur or what, but when I move across, like interprovincially, what I'll do is I will find multiple properties, set up like 5 or 6 tours in one day. I'll make the trip out. I'll spend 2 days, looking at apartments. I'll spend the day, looking around the city just to get a feel of where I am, and then from there I'll actually make my decision because I want to know what what it looks like myself. I might spot something that other people might not, But if you're moving from, if you're moving halfway around the world, that might not be possible. We typically say if you have friends, get them to do it for you. Alternatively, you really just have to, have a little bit of faith in the landlord.
Yeah, I used to have a lot of people who moved to my house in Fort Mac, and I advertised at one point through the HR department because I worked for a college there. And when people would get hired at HR and they just wanted a room for rent, and they'd say, well, where do I go? What do I do? And they'd say, well, here's an ad. We know her. She works for the college. And so that was kind of my endorsement. So, and I also knew that HR had screened them ahead of time. Not that I didn't do the screening. I still did a screening. But it was kind of a stronger recommendation for me that they'd already been endorsed because they'd been hired by the college, and that was kind of a referral for me as well. So yeah, there are other ways that you can sort of go about doing this.
A couple of things we did. We would print out the ad that we'd created and we would take it to like a hospital or a school or a place that, something close by that we figured there'd be people, well-qualified people who might happen by the ad on a bulletin board or something. I'm not sure if that's relevant to this, but it was a technique that we used.
Yeah, David's in digital marketing, so that's probably not something he would recommend.
Well, we're using the actual ad that we created, but
yeah, but to your point, hit all avenues. Just do as much as you can. I think that's really good.
Nowadays, what we do is we put up a building next to a hospital, and then we target, the nurses and doctors digitally instead of, bringing in the paper.
How do you target doctors and nurses digitally when it's a rental platform? Do you say ideal for nurses and doctors?
Absolutely, yeah. It's ideal for close commutes. That's what we say.
Oh, close commutes, because you can't use exclusive vocabulary within an ad.
That's exactly it.
Violation of the Human Rights Act. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, you passed that one with flying colors, David. A lot of landlords don't know that, and especially people who are new to Canada and they might have a rental property, they want to rent a room or they want to rent their suite, and they'll say, they want someone from their same ethnicity or from the same religion. You can't say that in Canada.
You can actually be sued and lose a whole pile of money.
The only way in which you're able to specifically target someone of a specific ethnic or religious set is if you yourself are actually running a religious organization. So there are multiple cases, specifically in the city of Toronto, that I've actually worked on, where you'll have these, Catholic charities, so actually run by a local Catholic church, where they'll have units that are subsidized, typically on the same land as a Catholic church, and then they can actually specifically target and only rent out to to other people of the same religious orientation. Excuse me. Otherwise, you're not allowed to do that. It's everybody's equal. When you're renting an apartment, you have to treat everybody equally. The only way that you're allowed to differentiate them is based on their whether they have a job and whether they have a good credit history.
Good to hear. Yeah, or start a cult. Rent on the same property or same area that you live in, or that you have your cult living in, and you're good to go. That was something I didn't know about. That's good to know, David. Thanks for that.
That is interesting. Yes, I didn't know that either. Okay, so do we have any other tips for landlords to get their properties noticed besides what we've covered?
Ooh, I think I've pretty much gone through everything that I had prepared. Only other thing I would recommend is, I know we talked about this right at the beginning. Obviously you want to put your ads online digitally. If someone is ever concerned about a property potentially being a scam, or they're not quite sure, what I always tell them: search the property online. If you're not sure if the person you're dealing with owns the property or is actually a representative, search them online, see if they exist. If it is a professionally managed property, they will have some online presence. Make sure you have a website. This is huge. I know a lot of smaller property managers and landlords just don't. A website's not expensive, and it will give you so much more credibility. And then the other one is, I know Rentboard and Rent Faster specifically, these are paid listings, and you know what you're paying for a reason, because it's a
Right.
quality platform. But if you can, put your listings in multiple platforms, because it's good for exposure, it's good for visibility, and if you're looking for someone clear across the country, just because Rentboard might be big in your community, rentals.ca might be bigger in the community that this person is coming from, and you want to make sure you're targeting the biggest, broadest majority of people that are actually looking for apartments, regardless of where they are.
Is there an easy way to know, like, for example, what would be popular in Newfoundland versus what would be possible in BC or Toronto?
No,
That's a
it really
question I'm
isn't.
just curious.
I can share, Rent Faster, Rentboard, very big in Alberta. Rentboard is also growing straight clear across the prairies. Very, really strong, grass there. Rentboard is also really big amongst secondary markets. So really, really important if you're in a smaller growing community. Rentboard is the place to go. Rentals.ca is big in all across Ontario, clear across Ontario, and it's also growing quite a lot out in British Columbia. And it also has a very strong presence in pretty much every major urban market: Calgary, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and the Atlantic provinces. And then Rent Canada, very similar to Rentboard, very strong in the prairies and in smaller growing communities. And then we also have Loué in Quebec. Not super relevant here.
That's fair, and those patterns will change over time anyway, because one goes up, one goes down. So what you're saying today may not be true a year from now.
That's why we say just put your listings on as many platforms as possible, because it brings up your exposure and makes sure that you're searchable.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and it's just like you said, it just takes that one person to rent your property, and then you pay for everything, right? So
That's correct.
yeah. All good. Well, that is fantastic. So that was an excellent summary. Thank you very much for that, David. And you gave a lot of really good tips, a lot of information that I had never heard of before. And I guess it really helps. I guess it does really help to have the data analytics, because you're looking at hard cold data every day. And so you can see the trends, and you can see the types of things that maybe I wouldn't see as a private landlord, looking at properties, running ads. I'm not getting the overview from the high level that you are. Is there any other data that you want to share with us? It's something we should be looking at, or it's something you're looking into that you might be sharing with us later on?
Well, I myself work for an organization called RentSync. We own and manage, we are the largest multifamily marketing, firm in Canada. We own and manage Rentboard, Rent Faster, amongst several other, brands. What I can say is, RentSync, correct, yes.
SYNC. Okay, I'll put that at the end.
RENTSYNC. So we deal directly with landlords. If you own multiple, multifamily properties, we allow you to very quickly syndicate your listings out to multiple platforms. We also have we have a big blog where I myself write articles, occasionally, typically once a month. We have a demand report which talks about lead volume each and every single month across Canada. And we take a lot of the insights that we learn and we make them public. So if you're interested to learn more, go to rentsync.com and check out the blog section.
Cool.
So rentsync.com.
RENTSYNC. Here, let me.
And yeah, it would be great to have it up on the board. Oh, look at that. Is that a t-shirt, David?
That is, in fact, it's my t-shirt.
Are you wearing that t-shirt also?
No, I'm wearing a polo.
What a traitor. What a traitor.
Can I ask where RentSync is, like where their office is?
Yeah, our head office is in St. Catharines, Ontario, and we have a satellite office in Toronto.
So I always thought that Rentboard was owned by someone in Calgary.
It was. They came over, they were part of our team, and we now manage the website.
Okay. So now
So you're a Rentboard and Rent Faster.
Correct.
I
yeah.
didn't realize that. I always loved. I don't know what Rentboard has for analytics, but Rent Faster had great analytics.
We really did.
Yeah, we still have the site. Every single city has, the achievable rents currently, achievable rents last year, and it'll give you some of the, deep, nitty gritty that you otherwise can't really get. Even rentals.ca, we release the monthly rent report, but that's just aggregated data. That's data that I've analyzed that we put together, whereas Rent Faster just gives everything to you.
Yeah, they had days on market. They had like all sorts of really fantastic information. We would, it's a fantastic site.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I love it too. Other question, my last question, I guess, would be: do you have data analytics for how the different, like when you look at, I have to back up. When you look at Canadian analytics for the rental housing market, typically you only see the rental housing market analytics for apartment buildings. Can you do the rental analytics, or do you have an aggregate report for the analytics for condos, houses, townhouses, single families, that sort of thing?
The reason you get analytics mostly for apartment buildings is that's done through CMHC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but with Rentboard and Rent Faster, they're using the data that they're getting.
Yeah, so the rentals.ca report, the rentals.ca rent report, which comes out every single month, typically around the 10th to the 11th. If you were ever, out and about and you hear, the market average rent for this city is, X dollars, or, year over year rents increased by this many percent, 9 times out of 10, in fact, 10 times out of 10, they're referring to the rentals.ca rent report. That data comes from Rent Faster and rentals.ca. In that report, we look at current market rents each and every single month. We break it down by total property. So that is single family, townhouses, duplex, triplex, apartment, condo. And then we also break it out apartment and condo only. We don't really do too much with just single family and townhouse. However, if that's something that someone is interested in, we do also offer reports for sale. So if you're looking just to get, just some data out there, they can always reach out to me. I'm happy to share my email with you, or if you want, you can share my email. And we make data available on an ad need basis.
Well, that's great, because we had interviewed Rent Panda 2 weeks before, and they had gotten data showing that it used to be the formula for renting a property was 1/3 of a tenant's rent, but they discovered now that it's between 46 and a little bit over 50% of most people's household income is going towards rent. Is that information you can offer as well, or?
We don't typically do that, but that is something that we can do. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a data analyst. If you give me a challenge, and I'll try to solve it for you.
A man after my own heart.
We like to say we have the largest database of purposeful rental data and just of current market rents in Canada. So if that's something someone is interested in, we have noticed that rents are substantially higher in regards to percentage of achievable income. That said, though, I'm speaking to a group of landlords here. Nobody's going to crucify me for this, but with the increase in achievable rents in the last 10 years, specifically, certainly in larger urban centers, a higher relative proportion of income being paid to rent isn't necessarily that difficult. If you're low income, yes, that is a problem. That is a challenge. But when we're talking about 50% of income, of someone's income potentially going to rent, we're not typically talking about someone very low income. We're talking about a young urban professional living in the city. They typically they'll achieve a stronger income, but they're also paying a larger proportion of that towards rent because they want the privilege of living in a nice urban environment.
Right. Yeah. And then are you seeing more people, I don't know if this is something you analyze, are you seeing more people in that income bracket with roommates or kind of mixed families? They might live with a brother or sister and then a couple of roommates or whatever to split the rent. Is that something you can analyze?
That is something that we're seeing. Yeah, that is something that we're seeing more of. We saw a pretty substantial increase in the proportion of renters that are now living with roommates. The proportion of renters under the age of 25 with a roommate is now higher than ever before. On top of that, we're also seeing, and this is a little more relevant to your previous question, The fastest growing income segment amongst renters is households with $120,000 or more. What that means is that we're seeing more and more renters with really high incomes coming into the rental market, and that's also skewing the rents because a lot of these households, they're not looking at downscale duplex apartments. They're looking at really upscale luxury rental accommodations, and they charge a pretty penny, and that'll represent a pretty substantial portion of their income potentially.
So these are not people who want to buy a house. They're people who make a good income, they're established in their careers, and they want to rent.
Whether they want to rent or they're relegated to the rental market, that's what we're seeing quite a lot of right now.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good information to have. And it's very interesting.
Yeah, very informative. I've learned a lot too.
Yeah, that is really excellent. David, you are a wealth of data information.
I'm going to help.
Yes, so I will post all of your information on the YouTube video, on the backlinks. So for those of you who are watching this and you're saying, how can I get hold of David? How can I get hold of RentSync? How can I get my hands on some of those data analytics? I will post all of that on the bottom of the YouTube video. So you will have everything. You will know everything that I know. So David, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was really great to hear all of your information and for you to share all of this wealth of knowledge with us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
And Gil, thank you for grilling David.
I really enjoyed this.
Thanks for the questions and thanks for the information. Renting is always an interesting place to be. You're never dealing with the same thing ever more than once. It's always different with every single person. Anyway, with that said, I'm Nelda Schulte. This is Alberta Landlords Watch. If you really liked this YouTube video, like it, share it. You can also find me on Instagram, Schulte Nelda. You can join my Facebook group, which is called Alberta Landlords Watch, or my Facebook page, Alberta Landlords Watch, and I'm also on LinkedIn, Nelda Schulte. So I look forward to supporting you in your landlording journey and offering you more of these wonderful guests who share their wealth of information with you to support you with your landlording journey. Thank you and good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.